The moment Jasmine Crockett leaned forward and said, "Marjorie didn't quit because of threats. She quit because of what she saw," everything about Marjorie Taylor Greene's sudden resignation changed. What had been framed as a personal decision driven by security concerns instantly became something far more unsettling. Crockett's words reframed the entire narrative. This wasn't about fear of harassment. It wasn't about burnout. It wasn't even about Trump's criticism alone. It was about consequences. It was about what happens when the political machinery you helped build finally turns its attention on you, and you realize too late that it doesn't distinguish between enemies and allies. What Crockett revealed in that interview wasn't simply commentary on one congresswoman stepping away. It was a warning, a signal that something fundamental had shifted inside the Republican conference. The resignation wasn't isolated, it wasn't random, it was the first visible crack in a system that had relied on secrecy, loyalty, and intimidation to hold itself together, and once that crack appeared, everything behind it started to strain. The question that immediately followed was unavoidable. What exactly did Marjorie Taylor Greene see that made her walk away after just 1 week of pressure? Because when you strip away the talking points and official statements, nothing about her departure made sense on its face. Greene had survived years of controversy. She had thrived on outrage. She had built her entire political identity around confrontation, defiance, and doubling down. This was someone who had never backed down when challenged publicly. And yet, after 7 days of criticism from Donald Trump, she was gone. The interview took place in a standard cable news studio, the kind of environment where political theater is routine and predictable. But when Jake Tapper asked Jasmine Crockett about Greene's resignation, something shifted. Crockett didn't look triumphant. She didn't look smug. She looked concerned, measured, almost cautious. The expression wasn't that of someone enjoying a rival's downfall. It was the expression of someone who understood what that downfall signaled. Tapper framed the question carefully. Greene had resigned effective immediately. Her statement cited personal reasons and increased security threats. Crockett, however, had been vocal about her skepticism. Tapper asked her directly what she thought really happened. Crockett paused before answering, and that pause mattered. When she spoke, her tone wasn't emotional. It was precise. She reminded viewers of something many had conveniently forgotten. Marjorie Taylor Greene had spent years building and fueling a political ecosystem rooted in hostility. She amplified conspiracy theories. She targeted colleagues by name. She stoked anger and legitimized intimidation. None of it was accidental. It was deliberate. It gave her power, attention, and influence within the MAGA movement. Then Crockett leaned forward and delivered the line that changed everything. After 1 week, 7 days of Donald Trump directing that same machinery at her, Greene folded. 1 week. Crockett contrasted that with her own experience, months of death threats, months of racist harassment. Months of people showing up outside her office, and she was still there, still doing her job. The implication was devastating. This was not about security. This was about something else entirely. When Tapper asked what that something else might be, Crockett chose her words carefully. She said Greene finally realized the monster she helped feed was going to consume her. But more importantly, Crockett suggested Greene saw something coming that she didn't want to be part of. That's where the story turned from political commentary into investigative alarm. Because the facts didn't line up, Trump had attacked other Republicans, Thomas Massie, Lauren Boebert, multiple members who signed onto the petition to release the Epstein files. They took the heat and stayed. They weathered the storm. Greene didn't. Why? Tapper asked the obvious question. Was this about the Epstein files? Crockett didn't claim certainty. She didn't need to. She pointed to timing. Greene had been one of the loudest voices demanding transparency around the Epstein files. Then suddenly, she stopped. Around the same time, congressional leadership became unusually tight-lipped. Democrats on relevant committees were being told there were developments they couldn't discuss yet. That level of internal secrecy was rare. It suggested something significant was unfolding behind closed doors. Crockett made an important distinction. She didn't claim to know exactly what was in the files or what Greene had seen. But she emphasized a core truth of political behavior. People who build careers on confrontation don't walk away from power unless they are being forced out or trying to get ahead of something worse. That clip went viral within hours, but it wasn't just because of Crockett's delivery. It was because her analysis explained something everyone else was avoiding. Greene's resignation didn't match the pressure she was under. It matched the pressure she expected to face next. Once that idea took hold, reporters started doing what they do best. They reconstructed the timeline. February 12th, Greene publicly calls for full transparency on the Epstein files. February 20th, she goes silent. February 27th, Trump criticizes her publicly. March 6th, she resigns, less than a month from aggressive advocacy to complete departure. The first thing to change wasn't Trump's tone. It was Greene's behavior. Then came the leaks. Anonymous Republican staffers began describing GOP conference meetings during that period as chaotic. One told Politico that members were screaming at each other over who signed what and who was protecting whom. Another told The Hill that Greene went from being Trump's attack dog to being genuinely scared, and it wasn't because of social media criticism. The most telling leak came from a source speaking to the Washington Post on deep background. According to that source, there had been a classified briefing in late February. Attendance was limited. New information related to the Epstein files was presented. The reaction in the room was described as shocked silence, followed by urgent conversations about legal exposure and political fallout. Greene was in that room. After that briefing, everything changed. She stopped returning calls from MAGA media figures. She began meeting privately with lawyers. She stopped defending Trump online, not criticizing him, just disappearing. For someone whose political identity was built on constant visibility, that silence was louder than any statement. Crockett addressed these developments in a follow-up statement released through social media. She wrote that Greene didn't resign because of mean tweets. She resigned because she learned something that made her position untenable. And the lengths Republican leadership was going to keep that information secret spoke volumes about how damaging it must be. Crockett laid out what was known, an expanding investigation into the Epstein network. Files not released to the public, files not fully shared with Congress, people in power worried about what those files contained, and a congresswoman who demanded transparency one week and resigned the next. The response from Republican leadership was revealing. Speaker Mike Johnson dismissed the resignation as a personal matter. He warned against speculation about closed-door briefings. He refused to confirm or deny whether such a briefing occurred. When asked about developments in the Epstein investigation, he deflected. He didn't deny anything. He simply refused to answer. To legal and procedural experts, that mattered. If there were nothing to the story, leadership could have said so outright. Instead, they chose silence paired with admonishment, a classic non-denial denial. Crockett continued pressing. On MSNBC, she expanded her argument. What the public was witnessing wasn't a policy dispute. It was a party unraveling because years of lies and cover-ups were colliding with reality. Greene wasn't the cause, she was a symptom, and when people realized loyalty wouldn't protect them from legal exposure, panic set in. When asked again what Greene might have seen, Crockett revealed more. There had been discussion in oversight circles about expanding the Epstein investigation beyond the network itself to potential cover-up activity after Epstein's death. References to evidence interference, improper access, questions about who handled sensitive materials. If Greene attended a briefing where she learned the investigation was expanding into that territory, and if she believed she or her associates could be implicated, her resignation suddenly looked strategic. Legal analysts began echoing that theory. Congressional immunity offers protections, but it also brings scrutiny. Resigning can sometimes reduce exposure. Greene's departure began to look less like surrender and more like preemption. Crockett reframed the issue again. The real question wasn't why Greene resigned. It was why leadership was so desperate to control information. What was in those files that justified this level of chaos? And who else might leave once they learned what Greene learned? That framing hit hard. Greene had been among Trump's most loyal defenders. If even she decided she needed out, what did that say about what she discovered? Then came another development. A second Republican announced they wouldn't seek re-election. Then a third. None cited Epstein. None explained their timing, but the clustering raised eyebrows. Observers began to wonder whether a quiet exodus was beginning among those who had been briefed. Crockett addressed this in a floor speech that resonated widely. The party wasn't fracturing over ideology. It was fracturing because people who had protected each other were realizing the walls were closing in. Loyalty wasn't enough anymore. Information was coming to light. She contrasted her own experience again. Months of threats. She stayed. Greene faced a fraction of that pressure and left. The implication was clear. One of them had nothing to fear from transparency. The other apparently did. In a later off-camera conversation with reporters, Crockett described MAGA politics as performance masquerading as strength. Greene embodied that, aggressive posturing without resilience. When real consequences appeared, the performance collapsed. Asked whether Trump forced Greene out, Crockett offered a nuanced answer. Trump made her position impossible, but Greene made the choice. She was trapped between loyalty and exposure. She chose self-preservation. As more reporting emerged, ProPublica revealed the DOJ had quietly expanded its review of Epstein-related materials, including potential obstruction. The Washington Post confirmed congressional investigators had been briefed. The timing aligned perfectly with Greene's resignation. In her final major statement on the issue, Crockett framed Greene's departure as a preview. A glimpse of what happens when a movement built on secrecy starts to unravel. People realize tribal loyalty doesn't shield them forever, and when they see what's coming, some choose to run. Crockett ended with a challenge. If information was powerful enough to end a congressional career, it was powerful enough for the public to see. Greene wasn't destroyed by Trump. She was destroyed by what was coming next, and that is why this resignation still matters. Because when powerful people suddenly quit, it's rarely about what they say. It's about what they've learned and what they're trying to get ahead of.